Video. Here we're going to start issuing commands within MySQL. In order to do that, if you're using Windows, you're just going to look for MySQL 8.0 Command Line Client. All right. Um, so if you look at your programs here recently added, you'll see MySQL 8.0 Command Line Client. You may also be able to find it in other places here. Right, yeah, MySQL 8.0 command line client. All right, enter password. That's going to be that password you created if you followed along with the last video. So whatever password it was that you used, enter, and here we are. Here we are. We are now using MySQL. Okay, and what we're going to do, I'm going to pull up this web browser. Have this be first half here. Good. All right, so half of my screen is going to be the MySQL command line client. The other half, we're going to be messing around with some tutorials. We'll go to W3 Schools, MySQL. All right, here we go, SQL tutorial. So you're going to go to www.w3schools.com/SQL. And before we can really get to this tutorial, all right, keep this open off to the side. I'm going to run through a few basic commands ahead of time here. All right, so one command we're going to issue to MySQL is show databases semicolon. You may have to have all caps, right? But it's not particularly case sensitive in terms of these keywords here. Show databases. So before explaining what this does, we're just going to run it. Show space databases semicolon enter. Okay, so we see here we have a text representation of different databases that currently exist in our MySQL environment. All right, so each of these rows here, these items, corresponds to a database. Right? What's the database? Well, this one is information schema, this one's MySQL, this one's performance schema, and this one's sys. Now, you're going to want to use one of those databases. So you would type use space and then the name of the database. So we'll put MySQL semicolon. Right, so use MySQL semicolon, enter. Enter. There we go. It'll just say let's say database changed, right? Other than that, it doesn't really look like anything happened. Excuse me. All right. But what we're going to do now is issue this command. Right, show tables. Get my cursor, my mouse out of the way. All right. Show tables, semicolon, enter. So tables in MySQL. So we're using the MySQL database by typing use MySQL. Now we're going to look at all the different tables that are available within the MySQL database. And here they all are. Each of these is a table in this specific database called MySQL. All right. It's very important to keep in mind that these are tables in a database called MySQL. This isn't MySQL itself. It's a database called MySQL. Everything we've been doing here, from typing in show databases and all of that, this is all occurring within MySQL, right? Within MySQL. Inside of the overall MySQL that we're using here, we've also identified a database that's the name happens to be MySQL. And we are using that database and looking at the tables inside that database. All right. So now what we're going to do is take a look at some of the examples in the tutorial. But we are going to use, we're going to substitute certain text in the tutorial for text that is relevant for our environment. Okay, so here where it says select star or asterisk from customers, instead over here we're going to type, right, select asterisk from, and then we're going to pick one of these. All right, pick one of these. And let's pick help underscore topic. Help underscore topic, semicolon. All right, so what I did, I looked at all these different tables. I substituted one of these tables in place of customers here. All right, and now I'm going to hit enter. There's a whole bunch of stuff. At some point, we're going to want to hit Control C. Right? That just stops our output. Right? I'm going to expand this. Just scroll up, and we're going to see that you can sort of deduce here and there, looking at some of this stuff here, some of the text, that this is all various portions of text from different help topics within MySQL. All right. So this, it's safe to assume. All right, bear with me for a moment because I just jumped right past. There we go. Safe to assume that, right, this here, right, this table stores information regarding help topics. All right. If instead we wanted to get a look at a table about users, select star from user, semicolon, hit enter. All right, now we get something that looks a little bit more useful, maybe. Okay, let me shrink this back up. Over here, let's scroll up and see. I'm going to start to tell you how to interpret this. All right, because it's sort of impossible to see here. These little dashes and plus signs and all that, they're just decoration, really. What we're going to look at here are these things, all right? Host, and then this line here, user, this line. These little lines here are actually pipes, P-I-P-E-S, pipes. And you type a pipe by typing the shift, holding the shift key and hitting the key that's likely right above your enter key. Okay, that's a pipe. What these are, this is a text representation of a table, and these, host, user, select priv, and so on, those are the names of fields or the names of columns. Right? So a field is synonymous with column. Let's see if we can find something that is a bit more easy to read here. All right. Scroll down. Let's show tables again. Select all from DB. Oh, I forgot the semicolon. Okay, thing to note here. I typed in select the star, which means all, and from, and then I typed in DB, which is the name of the table. And then I hit enter without typing the semicolon. Thankfully, MySQL is generous enough, flexible enough to allow me to enter the semicolon on the next line and hit enter. And there we go. Okay, here we go. Now we've got something slightly more useful than previously seen. All right, name of a column, host. Another column, DB. Another column, user. Select priv, and so on. Right, and then as we go down the column, we see rows, and these correspond to the field names. Right, so this piece of data here is indicating that we have a row of data where the host is called localhost and the database is called performance schema. All right. Likewise, we have another row. The host is localhost. The database is sys. And indeed, right, if I was to type show, keep doing that, show databases, information schema, performance schema, sys. All right, we begin to see how these things sort of relate to each other. Excuse me. Right. Now, let's go, let's minimize, bring this over here. All right, let's go back over to the tutorial here. And let's actually expand this. All right, over on the left-hand side, you see some different categories or topics. On the left-hand side, you're going to look for something like create table, create database. All right, create database. All right, so you're going to go to w3schools.com/SQL. That'll bring you here. You're going to scroll down to where it says SQL database on the left. You're going to click on SQL create DB. Okay. And then you're going to see a section here that says syntax, followed by some, what we're going to consider some pseudocode. All right. So create database, those are two actual MySQL commands, right? But this here where it says database name, that's just a placeholder for what you're actually going to type there. What we're actually going to use is this, create database test DB. Right? So bring this back over here, come over here. All right, so in MySQL, you're going to type create database test DB, just as it's written over here. Okay. And of course, you're going to want a semicolon. Hit enter. Okay. You get a little bit of feedback from MySQL saying that one row was affected, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't mean much to us right now, and that's okay. So for now, let's test to see if this database was actually created. And to do that, we would use show databases. Show databases. And there it is, test DB. Right? Let's come back over to the tutorial over here, expand it, and we're going to come down here. We'll come back to drop DB later. For now, we're going to create a table. All right, so click on SQL create table. Again, you'll see some pseudocode here. It's just telling you about the general form of using create table. Then we'll go down and we'll see this specific example here, SQL create table example. Shrink this back down a little bit. Boom. All right. Let's take a look at this and type it in over in our MySQL shell, all right, or MySQL Command Line Client. So create table, and we'll call it persons. Why not? Oh, first, we're going to use database test DB semicolon. Enter. Oh, I'm silly. Just use test DB. Okay, you don't have to put, this is not needed in here, right? For our use command, you just need to say which database you're using. So use what? Test DB. Enter. Database changed. We're going to go ahead and just run show tables. Well, there shouldn't be any because we didn't create any yet. And sure enough, empty set. Okay. All right. So we have now entered into the command line client from MySQL. We used a few commands like, I'm not going to go scroll back up through everything, but we did commands like show databases, all right, show tables, use, and so on. Now we're going to create a table within the test DB database. In order to do anything inside testDB, we had to specify that we are using testDB. So we typed use testDB, and now we can begin with our example from the tutorial. Create table persons, all right, open parentheses, hit enter, all right, person ID, int. What I'm basically doing here, all right, is following almost exactly what's being written over here. Okay. All right. Last name varchar. All right. For right now, don't worry about what these varchar and whatnot mean, because I'm going to explain it in a moment. Address varchar 255. City varchar 255. Enter. Close parentheses, semicolon. Don't hit enter yet. Let's just talk about this for a moment. All right, so we're using this create table command to create a table called persons. Then we're enclosing a bunch of lines here, a bunch of sections within parentheses. All right, so we have this opening parentheses, and there's a bunch of things that we are going to define inside this new table that we're creating. Each of these, right, person ID, last name, first name, address, city, these are all fields, also known as columns, right? So there will be a person ID column, last name column, first name column, address column, city column, and whenever you hear me say column, you can assume that I'm talking about fields, and vice versa. If I'm talking about fields, you can replace that with column. These things over here, int, varchar 255, varchar 255, and so on. Right? These, we're defining the metadata of this table. In other words, characteristics of the data. So for in this field, in this column, person ID, we are going to accept entries as integers, or integers as our entries. Okay. So any given cell underneath the person ID field or within the person ID column should be an integer. In the last name field or last name column, we are expecting characters. All right. These characters, all right, up to 255. All right. Varchar character up to 255 and so on. All right. And we will experiment with other metadata later on, and we'll talk a little bit more about metadata, but it's just enough to know that these are the field names on the left-hand side, and on the right-hand side you have the metadata of those fields. Okay, we close this parentheses down here and follow it up with a semicolon and hit enter. Okay, query OK, 0 rows affected. Looks kind of like nothing happened. All right. However, if we run show tables again, we now see that we have a table called persons in our table in our database testDB that we created previously up here. So we created a database. We verified that our database was created using show databases. Right. We began using the database that we created by using the use command. Once we specify that we're using that testDB database we created, we then check to see if there were any tables pre-existing, and there are not at that time. So we then created a table called persons. We talked about a little bit about metadata and fields and columns, and then we verified that that table exists inside the testDB database. I think that's more than enough for one video for now. Another video will be following where we will look more at some of the tutorials over at W3 Schools and play around inside the MySQL Command Line Client.